Welcome, everybody. Your time is valuable, and we appreciate that you spend it with us. And we want to bring more teaching to you, not just fun conversations, but some practical advice, maybe some suggestions, some things that we have run across that work for us and might work for you. One of those topics is discernment. You hear a lot about this D word, discernment, like what the heck is that, or what does that mean, or how do you develop discernment? And so I thought it would be fun for us to just get together and talk about briefly how we have developed discernment in our life. How do we recognize it in our body? How do we know what's good for us and what's not good for us? And that's basically the definition of discernment, is understanding what's good for you. And this is not about judging things or people or experiences as good or bad, because the same experience can be good for one person and not good for another, or a person, you know, blends well with this person over here, but not with that person. And yet, you know, how do we know what it is that's right for us without judging it? And so, you know, this took me personally a long time to discover, but I realized it had been with me. I was just ignoring it. So I grew up, I love my mom dearly. She's since passed. She's a wonderful person, but she was, I guess you would call her just moody a little bit. And so as a child, I learned discernment in terms of judging what kind of mood she was in and how to interact with her. And it was this feeling of eggshells, kind of like walking on eggshells. And I noticed that I also beat around the bush in my talking sometimes, because I'm sort of feeling people out with my language, but I didn't realize that that's what I was doing until I got much older. And so when I encounter something that may not be good for me, it's about feeling into my body and feeling the walking on eggshells sense, or the, like if I'm in an interaction with a person over and over, and I find that I monitor what I say to them and I feel like I'm walking on eggshells so as not to upset them, that's a stop. And
so you're self-filtering your own thoughts.
So I know that person, there's something wrong with this relationship, and maybe that person's not for me any longer. Or if I'm watching YouTube videos of different, whatever, spiritual teachers or something, anything like that, where they're teaching you something or sharing some things, it just might be like nails on a chalkboard, and I want to push through it. I've learned, don't push through it if I don't like it or it doesn't resonate. No matter how many of my friends are like, hey, you've checked this person out. This person's really good. And they're watching it all the time. And I watch it, and I've watched it a couple of times, and I'm like, I just can't. Then don't. Then just don't, right?
Right.
So sometimes the discernment is in your body. Sometimes it's just a feeling that you get. Sometimes it might be butterflies in your stomach, that sort of thing. So that feeling physically into it, I think, is a good way to develop discernment and trust yourself. Trust that discernment.
I think that's the biggest key, and of all of it is the trust. But maybe we can have another topic about trust. Because that really does play into it. I mean, Well, how do you do it? Because I noticed that there's a lot of things that I like to watch or listen to, people that I like to listen to, books I like to read, and you're just like, that just rubs me the wrong way, or it's not for me, or it's not something I want to know. How do you know that? Yeah, I mean, for myself, it's really been, I think we've talked about this in the past, this intuitive sense that I have. There's just, and I understand it now as discernment, but it is this intuitive, just almost like a yes-no binary kind of, on-off type of understanding. If I instantly, whether it's music or somebody talking or I an individual I get, near, I know within a fraction of a second I need to be or not be, with or without. Turn it on, turn it off, turn it up, turn it down. But there's, I mean, the best example of that is as this all kind of unfolded is Abraham Hicks. You started listening to Abraham Hicks right at the beginning of our awakening. I could not listen to her voice. It was fingernails on a chalkboard. What are you listening to? But now I can listen to it. And it comes down to there's a time that your frequencies are going to change, and you have to understand that, right? Mm-hmm. My frequency wasn't at a reception point to understand what she was saying or what was being channeled. Now I'm at a frequency place or a vibrational point where I can understand it. I can accept it. So, but
it's not never, it's just not now.
And that's the thing. It's
Right.
don't ever cast it so far outside of your, acceptance that you'll never go back. Never say never. Exactly. Never say never, because in time, certain things are going to cycle back around, and you're going to find vibration in it. But even as a child, I some people call it their spidey sense, right? The hair on their arm goes up, the hair on the back of their neck goes up when they get next to somebody, and they just know that's not a cool person. I had a lot of that growing up, and I honored a lot of it. A lot of it I didn't. I ignored a lot of it and got myself into trouble.
Yeah.
But that's the learning process. So we do have, we may ignore those signs of discernment. I can label it as discernment now because that's what it was. Mm-hmm. We can ignore those signs. It may not be the best.
It's at your peril.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
But in time, you're going to learn how it actually feels inside. And for me, when that truth, and I go back to truth, when that truth really settles in, whether it's a conversation I'm having with someone, whether I'm standing in front of someone, and that comes into play in my previous life as military and law enforcement, federal law enforcement. When I'm standing in front of somebody and I'm questioning them, I know within a second whether they're telling me the truth or they're not.
Yeah, that really helps.
There's just a knowing, and that's the discernment of, I'm discerning that you're telling me the truth. I know that that you are or you're not.
So that's a good point. I'm glad you brought that up. So discernment, really, the definition is discovering truth for you.
Yes.
Because the truth for you is not the truth for everybody.
That's true.
So it's about how do you recognize the truth for you, which can change over years, like you said.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
What your truth is now can change. So
flexibility. You have to understand your own flexibility. Yeah.
Right.
Well, okay. So for me, I guess there's a couple of ways that I look at it. I'm a very imaginative person, so I can come up with, well, this is my truth. This is, even though it's not good for me, and yeah, that's kind of made life a little bit harder at times. But for me, I've learned to isolate nudges. Like I get strong nudges towards doing something or not doing something. Before I had slipped and fallen in my shower last year, I had the biggest nudge, this thing just saying, you need to clean the shower. So I'm talking about a psychic, like thing going on here, or intuitive. You need to clean your shower and you need to shave your legs. And I'm like, why do I have this nudge? Like it wasn't a voice saying that. It was just this urge to do it. And I kept putting everything else first. And it turns out that because I had not cleaned my shower, they definitely wanted to do the tetanus shot. And because I had this gash on my leg going across, I couldn't shave my legs, Yeah. Anyway, it was so silly, but
it is a silly but good example.
But it's a very relevant example because there's a lot of times that we ignore those signs for ourselves.
Yeah.
So do you ever feel it in your body though too, or do you?
And that's to me that nudge. It feels like somebody's taking me, by the shoulders, or sometimes it's down in here more, but it's pushing. It is like a push. So it's a very physical presence to me. It's not just this idea that suddenly hits my head. It's like, okay, I really need to listen up. And then the other way that I, like when I'm, I guess, too much in my head and I'm not catching things like that, I exercise discernment by just looking at what's in front of me and just relaxing into it, like getting into that neutral space. And then you kind of have to ask a couple of different ways because you can really kind of, mess the question up, but I'll just sit there and go, is this the right path for me at this moment? Or is this the best path for me? Because it's always the right path because you're always on the path, but is this the best path for me? Best utilization of my time? And I teach all my clients this, because it's either you feel this expansive feeling and you're like, oh yes, or you get that contractive feeling. And so that I can pick up real easily around people. Like, okay, so my previous marriage was on the abusive side. So I learned, like, if I meet any male or female, that like they could be the nicest person, but I can pick up on those things real quick and easy, and it doesn't have to even make sense. It's a contractive feeling, and I know like contraction is a lie, something's wrong, something's off, whereas that expansion is truth, is yes, is your forward path is being connected. So and it's not always, it's the craziest thing, because it's not always either or, because I remember that same person. This is the hardest thing to explain to people. That same person, I remember feeling this flow going through us when we were in the car one time, because we were kind of joking around about, we're going to get engaged. Let's go look at, rings. And it was like, all of a sudden this flow happens, and I'm going, this should not be happening. I should not be doing this. And I remember looking at him, and it was like time slowed down, and I was like, we're going to do this, aren't we? Okay, sounds like someone who's in love, right? It's like, we're going to do this, And, but I knew there was a purpose in it, and I've always known it was having my daughter Tessa. This was the way she was coming in. And I mean, because there was so much spiritual guidance throughout that whole process with her coming in, and then the joint lessons that we learned from there on. So sometimes that discernment, can just be kind of like, okay, sit down, hold tight, this may not be a great experience, but trust us. And so it can be kind of a blend, but so that's...
Which is why if you're using your head, you can talk yourself out of what is your path. Or avoiding somebody, and you talk yourself out of it by saying, well, there's nothing wrong with them. Look, they're friends with everybody, and da-da-da, and they're doing this. But when you sit with it in your heart and you take out the logical thought process, then it's easier to tune in. Discernment. Practice it. Feel it, and discover what's true for you. Thanks for joining us for the short.
Thank you guys. Bye-bye now.